In today's rather short episode of the podcast, I just want to update you on the progress I've made and where I'm going with my improvised Fisherman's wool sweater. So if you're up for some cozy knitting conversation, grab something good to drink and maybe even your knitting, and let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Wool Needles Hands Knitting Podcast. My name is Taylor, and I will be your host. If you are new here, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out my little corner of YouTube. And if you're a returning viewer and subscriber, welcome back. Today's going to be a rather short one because I am actually filming this on Thursday, and tomorrow morning we get up really early to get ready to fly out to Dallas to see our family over there. So I wanted to make sure to get a podcast out for you guys because I wanted to share some progress, but I knew it was going to have to be a little bit more of an abbreviated episode, but I do think that you'll enjoy some of the information I have to share with you guys today. But before I get started doing that, I just want to remind you that if you haven't already, definitely head over to woolneedleshands.com to sign up for the Wool Needles Hands newsletter. It's a monthly recap that I send out at the beginning of every month, recapping the previous month with photos and my thoughts and various different things like that. And I do plan on adding new elements to the newsletter moving forward, but if you haven't signed up, definitely do. And while you're over there, you can shop some of my original patterns, be linked off to the merchandise website for the Wool Needles Hands YouTube channel. You can also learn more about me and where I got started, all of the good things. So definitely be sure to check that out. Thank you very much in advance. Okay, now since my recent episode of the podcast where I shared more of the progress that I made on my improvised top-down Fisherman's wool sweater, I had a lot of folks getting in touch with me saying that they're super excited to see where I'm going with this and if I could give them any information on what it is that I've done so far because they'd like to do something similar. Now, if you've watched the previous episodes of the podcast where I've chatted about this, you know that it's kind of a Franken sweater, if you will. I'm putting together pieces of different sweaters that I have knit in the past to create what, in my opinion, would be an ideal kind of oversized raglan sweater, if you will. So what I'm using here are elements of paid for patterns that I've used previously. So it's kind of hard for me to give out, stitch counts and things like that, only because those are elements that are from other patterns. And I've made it very clear that that's how I'm creating the sweater. This is not something that I just came up with off the top of my head. I'm not a sweater pattern writer. I don't have that kind of skill yet. So that's why I am creating this sweater as like a Franken sweater, because I don't have that skill right now. And I think that that's something that's okay to do. If you want to kind of create your own improvised sweater based off of patterns that you've knit in the past or patterns that you see that you really like. Maybe you like the color of this, like I like the color of the Magnolia bloom. Maybe you like the yoke shaping of this and the body shaping of this. Purchasing those patterns and then looking at them together and figuring out how you can put them together piecemeal, that's totally something that you should explore if you feel like no one pattern has it all. There is an element of math involved in that, but if you're working on top-down sweaters, especially raglan sweaters that can kind of be adjusted as you go, there is definitely math involved in figuring out your stitch counts and things like that. But that's what I'm doing with this sweater. So what I wanted to do today was to not only show the progress that I've made, but to share with you a little bit about what I have done so far, so that you know where to look if you wanted to do something similar. Okay, before I do that, let me go ahead and just give you a quick look. This is where we are so far. Now, I know this is not a huge amount of progress since we last spoke about it, and the reason is because I realized after that episode of the podcast, thanks to a viewer who got in touch with me via direct message over on Instagram, that I had far too many underarm stitches. Now, I don't know if you remember, but on the last episode, I brought it up that I was trying to decide how many, or I had decided, but I went back and forth about how many underarm stitches to cast on. And I shared that with you on that episode of the podcast. And I had ended up casting on something like, I don't know, like 12 or 13 underarm stitches. And at the time that I filmed that episode, I only had like an inch of body knit. So it was just like a little strip of fabric. And I kind of got this feeling that it was too much. There was too much going on there. Well, after I filmed the episode, I took a picture of the sweater on my mannequin Gladys, which you can't see because she's just kind of off screen over here. And I posted it on Instagram, and somebody got in touch with me really quickly and very respectfully, with absolutely no, it was just very sweet, said that it looks like there might be too many underarm stitches, that I'm going to have just too much fabric under there. And I looked at the picture, totally understood what this person was talking about, and I went back to my actual sweater and looked at the underarm stitches, and I absolutely had far too many underarm stitches. I was getting this weird bump out of fabric on the side, not only on the mannequin, who is significantly slimmer than I am, but also on me. And I was so thankful that this person reached out to let me know, because I think that takes a lot of courage to do that, because you're, essentially criticizing somebody's work. And I don't mean criticizing in like the nagging sense. I just mean you're providing like a constructive criticism of something they've done for the purpose of helping them. And that takes courage, because you just don't know how a person's going to react. Well, I was so grateful to her for pointing it out to me. And I immediately knew that the only thing for me to do was to pull out what I had done. And at the time that I had realized I had more work, I had worked on it more. So I want to say about 2 inches less than what you're seeing here. Not a ton. Definitely not something that's like depressing to have to rip back, but it was enough. And because I have Surrey paired with this yarn, it was kind of a chore to rip it back, but I knew I needed to do that because it was something that was going to make me just feel so much more confident moving forward with this project. And also too, like, I based the stitch count, the underarm count, on the Felix Pullover, but I didn't consider the fact that the weight of the yarn, the way that I have it here paired with Surrey, is just slightly heavier than the weight of the yarn I've used for that sweater in the past. So, it was just, I had to take that into consideration more than I did. So that was something that slowed my roll just a little bit. And actually, after ripping back and getting back to like where I needed to be to make a correction, I put the sweater down for a day and I was working on another project, because I just felt like I need to let it cool. I need to let it simmer down a little bit, and then I'll come back to it tomorrow. And that's what I did. So this is the progress I have, but it is happy, confident progress, because I know I'm moving in the right direction, and that feels really good. So yeah, this is where we are so far. It's really looking nice. And there is going to be some good positive ease here. I want to say it's roughly 10 inches of positive ease, and that's okay. I want it to be really, oversized and cozy. Now, I want to share with you, here, let me share with you the yarn, just in case you are new here and you haven't seen it yet. I am using Laine brand Fisherman's wool, which is 100% virgin wool, undyed, untreated, absolutely beautiful budget rustic yarn. You can pick it up at a big box craft store, or you can pick it up on Amazon. I'll link to it down below. This is the, birch tweed. And the tweed, the little neps that you see in there, those little spots are the only things that are not 100% wool. Those are viscose. They're really hard to get out usually, but that one came right out. So good. Yeah, just put it on the floor. No big deal. But yeah, so that is what I have as my base yarn. And then the yarn that I'm pairing it with is a Surrey Silky. It's not a lace weight. It's kind of a sport weight yarn, to be honest, like a heavier fingering when you kind of gauge it with your yarn. But this is 70% brushed Surrey alpaca and 30% silk. And it's gorgeous. So when you pair these two together, it's really yarn magic. Super creamy and buttery. And I love it. But not too buttery. There's definitely some toothiness in there, but it's soft more than anything. And I love that. Look at that lovely cross section. You guys, I love a good cross section. What can I say? Okay, so let me give you a little bit of a rundown of what it is that I've done here, so that going forward. I'm using my Laine Publishing Knitter's Notes, or My Knitting Notes journal. You can purchase this on their website. It just has pages in here where you can keep notes on your projects, with a few blank pages to also do sketches or what have you. So this is the page for my Fisherman's Wool sweater notes. And these are some of the details that I can share with you. I'm using 2 needle sizes. I'm using a size 8 and a size 10.5. I'm pairing these 2 yarns together, and they are giving me, I'll give you a rough gauge. So this is not ideal gauge swatching conditions, but I'll do my best. So I am getting roughly, I'm going to give it to you for 2 inches. Okay, I'm getting 7 stitches per 2 inches. So that's, that's a heavy yarn gauge. That's bordering heavy Aran to light chunky weight. So 7 stitches to 2 inches, which is 14 stitches to 4 inches roughly. Okay, this is rough. That's the gauge that I have so far. And you know what? I need to write that down because I haven't done that. You can, say what you will, but it's roughly, I'm going to do that little symbol that you do for roughly 14 stitches to 4 inches. Okay, so that's roughly my gauge. And now to start the sweater, I was inspired to do the neckline of the Magnolia Bloom pullover by Camilla Vad. It's this gorgeous, double thick neckline. And I recently finished, well, I didn't recently finish, I finished it a year ago, but I finished that sweater, fell in love with that neckline, and that's what I'm doing here. In order to achieve that neckline, I aimed for 80 stitches, and that's 80 stitches is my own number. That's not coming from a pattern. So I aimed for casting on 80 stitches. I did a 4-inch long neckline, knit 1, purl 1, rib, and then in order to create that doubled over neckline, I just rolled it in on itself, and then I knit the cast on stitches together with my live stitches. There's a whole way for doing this. It's a whole technique. You can look it up on YouTube. I'm not trying to do a tutorial here. I'm just kind of telling you what I did. So I did my 4-inch rolled neckline, folded over and knit together, and that created my neckline. And then in order to match the count that I needed to do the yoke of the sweater as for the Felix pullover, I needed to increase my stitches evenly to achieve that initial stitch count required for the Felix pullover yoke, if that makes any sense. And I was aiming for the second size of the Felix pullover, and that would require me to cast on an additional 4 stitches, and that's all I'll say about that. So that would leave me with 84 stitches before starting the Felix pullover yoke. Are you with me? Okay, so that's where I'm at so far. So cast on my 80 stitches, did my rolled neckline, increased 4 stitches, and then I was ready to start my yoke. So I changed to my larger needle size, and I did the yoke as for the Felix pullover, but instead of the little eyelets that run down the raglan seams of the Felix pullover, I did knit through the front and back increases on either side of the stitch markers, giving me just a really clean raglan seam. So, and I love that seam. I just love a knit through the front and back raglan seam. I know some people will do like a knit through or a make one right, make one left on either side of the stitch marker. I just kind of like a nice neutral increase on either side of the stitch marker to create those raglans. I just think it's a nice seam. It looks really nice. So that's what I did. So everything in terms of like short row shaping and increased number and count and all of that for the yoke is as per the Felix pullover, just with that little modification to remove the eyelets. And all of this is as for the second size of the Felix pullover. So I carried on doing the yoke of the Felix pullover. I carried on for 10 inches. And then when it was time to cast on the underarm stitches, that's when I initially casted on the same number of underarm stitches prescribed in the Felix pullover for that size, only to realize that that was going to be too many underarm stitches because of the weight of the yarn being different. So my gauge was just different. So I went back and instead of casting on that number of underarm stitches, I casted on the number of underarm stitches designated in the smallest size of the Felix pullover. All of this I will write down at the end of all of this, and I will share it with you in an email, in a newsletter. You know what? I'll tell you what. That's what I'll do. I'll share with you exactly what I did on this, omitting stitch counts and anything like that that would be giving away information from the pattern, but I'll share everything kind of like I'm sharing it with you now, but in text form so you can read it and take note. I'll share it in the issue of the newsletter that comes out after I finish this. So, okay, moving forward. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I have done my underarm stitches and now I'm working the body of the sweater. My plan now is to move into No Frills by Petite Knit, No Frills territory for the body of the sweater. And I'm doing that because I like the length of the no frills, the body of the no frills sweater, and I like the shaping at the hips of the no frills sweater. There's no waist shaping in that sweater, but there is hip shaping. So right when you get down to where you would move to the hem of the sweater, you do a decrease and then you knit the hem in the no frills pullover. And that's what I plan on doing with this. But I have to remember the yarn weight here, and because of the yarn weight, the stitch count here is going to be dramatically different here than it is on the no frills pullover, so I have to consider that. So I plan on knitting the body of the sweater to the designated length of the no frills pullover and then doing the decrease right before doing my knit one, purl one rib. The decrease that happens right before you do that hemline, because I can't count on the stitch count working for my sweater, I had to figure out the percentage of stitches being decreased in the no frills pattern, and then just take that same percentage of my body stitches and decrease that number of stitches for this sweater, if that makes any sense. And I determined, based on the no frills pattern, that you would need to decrease 12% of your body stitches to get the same rate of decrease on this sweater, which is a much heavier weight sweater. And that's my plan. And that's probably as much as I'm going to share here, if your brain is even still with me. I know that was a lot. I didn't intend for that to be like me prescribing you a full-on pattern recipe, but I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of where I was going with that. So that, not only so that you can maybe, keep track of where I'm at with this and understand what I'm doing and my thoughts on this, but maybe you can just take from that you can do this if you wanted. You can find patterns that work for you and put them together piecemeal. And that's exactly what I'm doing with this sweater. And I feel really great about it. You kind of think that maybe something like this would lead to, knitting that lacks confidence because you're just not sure what's going to happen. And, in some cases that happened because of those, like that underarm stitch count definitely posed a challenge that maybe I wouldn't have caught until it was too late and then decided to rip back the whole sweater. And thanks to the person who reached out to me to let me know, I managed to correct it and I feel really good about it now. Something that I didn't do, and this is a big no-no, and I'm not an expert or a professional knitter, but I didn't think to do it, is I wasn't taking like proper gauge. I wasn't like looking at my gauge and realizing like, what, your gauge is a little bit different than the Felix Pullover gauge, so perhaps you don't want to do that particular underarm stitch count. I wasn't doing that. And I'm not an avid gauge swatcher. I'll do it occasionally. I do it, I think, more often than not, but I'm not always doing it. But there is something to say for gauge swatching, or at least just like checking your rough gauge like I did just a moment ago, if you're doing an improvised sweater like that. So, learn from my mistakes. That is definitely something moving forward when I do another one of these improvised sweaters that I'll be paying more attention to. This really is like very much a spontaneous, kind of like on a whim sweater that I'm making, and I'm just kind of working as I go. So it's not like very technical, but I'm taking notes, I'm keeping track of things, and I'm pretty confident that it's going to come out nice. So that's where I am with that. Now, what I want to ask you is, do you, after hearing me talk about all of this, what are your thoughts? Do you see yourself improvising sweaters? Do you have tips for anybody who wants to improvise a sweater? Like, what are your thoughts on this whole situation I have going on back here? Do you feel motivated to try it yourself? And I hope that you do. And now I don't mean everything I'm doing here is perfect and you should do it just the way I'm doing it, because obviously there are things that I would tweak if I did this again, which I will. But I do hope that you kind of feel motivated to know, or inspired at the idea that you can take patterns from your library and, try to stick with similar yarn weights. I think that would be a good, recommendation. But you can put little pieces together and create your own Franken sweater. And also, too, it challenges you to learn the math involved. And nobody wants to do that. Like, I get that just sounds like a really gross idea. But there's something really fulfilling in that. So, I don't know. I hope that could be a takeaway for you. Also, too, I wanted to direct your attention to a place that kind of started me on my road to sweater knitting way back in 2015, when I really started to kind of embark on sweater knitting, and that's Karen Templer. So Karen Templer was the one who owned the Fringe Supply Company. They no longer have a company, but she started Fringe Supply Company. But before she did that, she had a website called Fringe Association. And you know what? I would like to know, if she still has fringe association, because I have not looked recently to know. But I loved reading this website, reading this blog, because I felt like she had such great insight on knitting. Yeah, no, it's still here. It's called KT's Slow Closet, formerly Fringe Association, and it's by Karen Templer. Wow, okay, lots of interesting things happening over here. But she has just always been a source of inspiration for me when it comes to creating your own knit clothing, putting things together, designing sweaters. I'm just showing you kind of like an idea of what it looks like. And she had a tutorial a while ago on how to improvise your own top-down sweater. And I'm going to link to it down below because I think it's really a great place to start. And she always has just like the clearest photos, and her writing style is so easy to read, and you can really appreciate like the cadence of her writing. Oh, I really need to get back into reading her blog because it's just so good. But anyway, that's where I initially kind of became inspired to improvise a sweater. And this really is the first, actually, no, it's not. There is a sweater that I knit a long time ago, back when I was discovering her. I'll pop a picture up if I can find one. This is my first improvised sweater, and it was huge. It was not huge in size, it was just really bulky. But anyway, this is like the second improvised sweater I've ever done. So I don't know. I think that it's really cool to explore anything improvised because you learn so much through that process. So that's all I have to share with you guys today in regards to my projects. I'm really excited to come back next time and have a lot more progress on that sweater to share with you, because I really think that the further I go with that, the more inspiring it's going to become. But yeah, I've enjoyed this. Thank you for letting me sit here and meander on with my thoughts about that sweater. I hope you took something away from this. It's always so lovely to be able to sit and chat here with you guys. So please, if you did enjoy yourself, and if you did take value from this video, please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Definitely subscribe, and be sure to click the bell icon so you can be notified anytime I upload new content here on the channel. I upload content every Wednesday and every Sunday, and it is an absolute pleasure. Until the next time we see each other, happy knitting, happy making, take care, be well, and I will see you soon. Bye!